you know what? This is what the players don't get. You're already in a PR disaster right now.
Because now we know how much you need us. We see the valuations between all the teams and all the things and the expansion fees, and it's like,
it sucks because it's like how our negotiation, all that, how that's going. It's like we're the laughing stock of sports right now.
I don't think that.
No, there's a lot of money behind this, so like, don't forget to pay us too.
Yeah, you're losing ground with fans now.
Sophie Cunningham didn't even have to raise her voice. The look on her face did the talking. When a player says the league is the laughingstock of sports right now, that's not a hot take for clicks. That's frustration showing through. The kind you can't script, because she knows how this is being watched by fans, sponsors, and every other league that's waiting to see if the WNBA can hold momentum or fumble it. And that's why this moment matters more than any vague talks are ongoing statement. We've crossed into a new phase where players aren't just venting behind the scenes. They're signaling publicly and clearly that missed games are on the table.
Y'all are prepared not to play this season? I know you want to, but would you say you're prepared not to play?
We've approved the strike authorization vote, which means that we're able to formally lock out whenever we want because we have majority of the players' votes behind us. I think that for me personally, like the closer it gets to WNBA season, we're prepared to do it, to not play, but we don't want to. We want to play because we know how important it is to be on the court for a number of reasons, for the people, for the fans, for the city. But it'll be something that's really tough if push comes to shove.
Not as a rumor, not as an insider report, as an open warning that the labor fight is bigger than PR now. The union already loaded the chamber when it passed a strike authorization vote back in February 2025. That vote didn't end the season, but it changed the leverage. It told ownership the players are willing to turn the key if negotiations stall. And it told fans this isn't a bluff built for social media. When you give leadership the power to stop work, you're admitting you might actually use it. Then Breanna Stewart says the quiet part out loud. The divide isn't whether a strike is justified. The divide is who can afford it. A small group of stars can ride out months without checks. The majority cannot. That's the pressure point that makes everything shaky, because unity sounds strong until rent and bills show up on schedule. And that's where the tension turns real. Reports of disagreement inside the players' own leadership aren't surprising. They're inevitable. Some want to go for the biggest number possible and never blink. Others are staring at the calendar, doing the math and realizing a missed paycheck doesn't feel symbolic when it's your entire income stream. This is the reality Stewart just put on the table, and once that reality is public, both sides start playing a different game. A WNBA player who isn't in that top tier can't just casually absorb a lost season. The overseas money doesn't kick in until the fall. The endorsements for most of the roster are small, sometimes non-existent, so if a strike hits in May, you're talking about a long stretch with no real income until October at the earliest. That's the part the public keeps circling back to, while union leadership repeats, "We're prepared to do whatever it takes."
This week,
And
negotiations are in process
to get things moving.
in hopes of getting it moving because it has not been moving at all. Both sides are kind of getting, frustrated, but I know us players are holding our ground, so it should be interesting. At the end of the day, depending on where these negotiations go, like if you give these players what they want, you're going to get all the best players. Therefore, you're going to win. Therefore, your ticket sales are going to be up. Everything's going to be up.
But that's what these negotiations are, is finding where that middle is. Yeah.
It sucks because it's like how our negotiation, all that, how that's going. It's like we're the laughing stock.
That line is meant to project strength, but to a lot of people, it reads like recklessness, especially when it's coming from players who won't be the ones feeling the worst of it. And the optics get even worse when the messaging doesn't match the math. Listen to how Sophie frames the negotiation. Her argument is basically that paying more attracts better talent. Better talent leads to winning. Winning boosts ticket sales, and ticket sales justify the investment. In a mature, consistently profitable league, that logic can sound clean. In the WNBA, it lands differently because so many fans already believe the league is still building its revenue foundation, not sitting on a massive surplus. That's why the history matters. The WNBA has had long stretches where profitability has been questioned, and the league's relationship with the NBA has always been part of the conversation. So when fans hear about proposals that would dramatically raise average pay over a few years and create a path to multi-million-dollar top-end deals, they don't automatically react with outrage at ownership. A lot of them react with disbelief that it still isn't enough. From the outside, it looks like a massive leap. For players who were in the mid-five-figure range not that long ago, a jump towards six figures and beyond feels like a life-changing shift. But the public isn't hearing we're negotiating details. They're hearing we're ready to shut it down.
But I know, like, personally as WNBA players, it's like, well, we've signed however many CBA deals before, and we just don't want to get gypped. We don't want to feel like we're signing something and we're actually getting, like, screwed, because now we know how much you need us. We see the valuations between all the teams and all the things and the expansion fees, and it's like, no, there's a lot of money behind this, so, like, don't forget to pay us too.
Are you sure you don't want a policy against weed? Are you sure about that?
They're hearing comparisons to a men's league that prints billions annually, when the WNBA's revenue is in a completely different bracket. Whether that comparison is fair or not, it's a losing frame with casual fans, because it makes the demand sound disconnected from the league's current financial reality. The most revealing line in all of this is Breanna Stewart saying she doesn't want to sign something and later realize they got taken advantage of, because now they know how much the league needs them. That wording is the tell. It isn't just about salary numbers anymore. It's about power, and about the belief that the balance of power finally shifted. You can see why they feel that way. They watched Caitlin Clark turn road games into sellouts. They watched ratings spike when Indiana played. They saw that a huge chunk of the most watched games in 2024 had the fever in them, and they connected the dots. In their mind, that surge wasn't a nice bonus. It was proof the league has a new engine, and therefore the players should negotiate like they're no longer asking, but collecting. But here's the uncomfortable part they're not saying out loud. The league doesn't depend on all 144 players in the same way. Pro sports has always been a top-heavy economy. A small tier drives attention, tickets, and media money. A second tier stabilizes the product, and everyone else fights for a smaller slice of security. That's not a moral statement. It's how the business behaves when the revenue is star-driven. So when Stewart points to rising team valuations and expansion fees as evidence that ownership can pay more, she's leaning on numbers that are fueled by projected growth, not guaranteed cash sitting in a vault. Expansion fees and valuations reflect what investors believe the league can become, assuming the momentum continues, assuming the casual audience stays engaged, assuming the stars keep the spotlight bright. That's the risk. If a season gets wiped out or heavily disrupted, momentum doesn't just pause. It can break. Casual fans don't always come back on command. And the scary part for the league is that the projections everyone is celebrating are built on the idea that this wave keeps rolling. If the wave crashes, those future-looking numbers start looking a lot less real. Here's where the whole situation gets even more complicated. Sophie Cunningham takes aim at the commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, basically saying the league should be louder on social media, that she could still get on platforms and say she believes in the product and loves the product. On the surface, that sounds fair. If you're the face of the league, you should sound like you actually want people to support it. But look at what that request really means in this specific moment.
Everyone wants to be the star. Our commissioner right now, even though we're not agreeing on negotiations or barely even talking at all, like, she could still go on other social media platforms and, like, be like, hey, I believe in our product. I love our product, because that gives off a different feel than just not saying anything and acting like we don't exist.
Sophie is asking the league to aggressively sell a season while players are openly floating the idea of not showing up for it. She's asking ownership to pour resources into marketing games that might not happen. She's asking the commissioner to amplify hype while the headline everyone sees is work stoppage possible. That's not how labor negotiations typically play out. When the labor side is signaling it may withhold the product, the other side isn't going to spend like the product is guaranteed. A league can't reasonably run full promotional campaigns while also preparing for the possibility that the schedule collapses. That's not strategy. That's lighting money on fire. And this is why the public gets impatient. Fans aren't just hearing that talks are tense. They're hearing a very real possibility of a strike, and then they're hearing players criticize the league for not marketing hard enough. To an average viewer, that sounds like mixed messaging. It sounds like both sides want leverage, but nobody wants to own the consequences. Go back to the moment this controversy started gaining oxygen, when a commentator said this is the first time he genuinely believes a strike could happen. That was early March 2025, right after the strike authorization vote. His reaction wasn't outrage. It was disbelief, because everyone understands what a stoppage would do to a league that's still trying to lock in casual fans, stabilize its business, and keep growth from turning into a temporary spike.
That they've been handed by the NBA is unfair. And there's no way they don't know that they're not going to run their league into the ground. Are they just counting on Caitlin Clark being able to save it? If you lose one game, it's going to be a PR disaster. One game, if you lose a preseason game, it's going to be a disaster. Now you see, I've got 2 sets of videos here.
That's the core tension. Players may feel momentum gives them power, but a strike would also hit the exact thing they're using as leverage, the league's fragile progress and the public goodwill that comes with it. Here's the part that gets lost in the shouting. For the first time, the framework being discussed would move WNBA players toward a 50% share of league revenue once specific growth thresholds are reached. In other words, a structure that mirrors what people point to in other major leagues. The dispute isn't the concept of revenue sharing, it's the conditions attached to it. Players are pushing back on the benchmarks because benchmarks delay certainty. They don't want a payout that only arrives if the league hits targets later. They want guarantees up front. They want the new money to be real on day one, not something that depends on projections, performance metrics, or a revenue number that has to be reached before the split kicks in. The problem is that the league's revenue and the league's financial reality are not the same thing. If the WNBA generates roughly a couple $100 million in revenue for a season, the arithmetic looks incredible at first glance. Slice a big percentage of that across a 144-player workforce, and suddenly the average number sounds like a different universe compared to where salaries have been. But revenue is not profit, and revenue does not automatically mean there's cash available to distribute. Expenses exist, operations exist, investment exists. If outside support is still covering gaps, then demanding a larger guaranteed share without acknowledging the gap is essentially demanding that the backstop gets bigger. That's what fans sense, even if nobody is saying it that bluntly. And this is where Stewart accidentally explains the entire standoff. She points out that a small group of stars can absorb a long stretch without WNBA checks, while most of the league can't. Then she tries to pivot back into unity, praising the union's approach and repeating that players are willing to sit out if they don't get what they want, while also insisting they don't want it to come to that. That combination is the tension in one breath. Strong talk to maintain leverage, paired with a financial reality that makes the threat uneven. It's not just owners versus players, it's also stars versus the rest, at least when it comes to who can survive the cost of pushing this to the edge. That contradiction is the core of the problem. She understands that most players can't weather a strike. She understands the strain inside the union. She understands that pushing this to the extreme could stall or even end careers for players who don't have star-level security. And yet the message stays the same, that sitting out is on the table, because a small group at the top believes it has enough leverage to pull everyone else with them. That's why the reporting about internal concern matters so much. Behind closed doors, there are players who are uneasy with the timeline. They're thinking about younger teammates who need games, reps, and visibility. They're thinking about international players whose overseas contracts depend on staying relevant in the WNBA rotation. They're thinking about how hard it was to get the league back into mainstream sports conversations, and how easy it would be to lose that ground again. None of that can be said out loud right now. Publicly, the union has to project unity, even if the confidence isn't evenly shared.
For a number of reasons, for the people, for the fans, for the city, but it'll be something that's really tough if push comes to shove, because, you know, like you said, you're comparing apples to oranges. The W and the NBA, like, contracts are vastly different.
Very skewed, yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the top 10, maybe 15 players can survive without a W contract.
Right.
But the rest, it's like, no, you don't want to go that much without getting paid. I feel like the PA is doing a great job of making sure that we have like the amenities and the resources, and if we don't get what...
So the language becomes careful and repetitive. We don't want to strike, but we're ready to. That isn't a power move. It's a balancing act, trying to sound firm without fully committing to a path that scares a lot of the people involved. This is where the situation turns from tense to dangerous. Every time players publicly emphasize the possibility of a strike, they're not pressuring owners as much as they're testing fan patience. The longtime supporters who have been riding with the league for decades will likely stay. They've already lived through instability before. The risk is with the newer audience, the casual viewers who tuned in because something felt fresh and exciting. Those fans didn't arrive because of labor politics. They arrived because of stars, storylines, and moments that cut through the noise of a crowded sports calendar. Their loyalty is thin by nature. If games disappear or the conversation turns into a prolonged fight over money, their attention doesn't linger. It moves back to the NBA, back to college basketball, back to whatever is reliably on and easy to follow. The recent growth proves how high the ceiling could be, but it also shows how delicate the moment is. Momentum built on curiosity and star power can vanish quickly. Nothing kills excitement faster than canceled games and public disputes over pay when many fans are dealing with their own financial pressure. You don't even need to guess how that plays. The reaction is already visible, and once that goodwill slips, it's far harder to rebuild than it was to gain. When the strike authorization news hit, the loudest reaction online wasn't solidarity. It was disbelief. The top comments were basically saying the same thing in different ways. This league hasn't consistently made money, and now you're talking about shutting it down. Ownership just floated raises that look massive compared to where salaries have been, and the response still sounds like it isn't enough. That's not some coordinated smear campaign. That's how a lot of regular sports fans think. They treat it like a business problem. They hear strike and immediately ask, what's the product worth right now? Not what it could be worth someday. Not what the league might become if everything breaks right. What it is today. And that's where the messaging keeps backfiring. Players keep pointing to expansion fees and rising valuations as proof that the money is already there. Golden State paid a big fee. Portland paid a similar number. To fans, those aren't paychecks waiting to be cashed. Those are owners making a wager on the future. Expansion fees and valuations are optimism, not operating profit. The people paying those fees aren't buying today's balance sheet. They're buying tomorrow's possibility. They're betting that the new wave of attention sticks. They're betting that stars keep the spotlight, that media rights keep improving, that corporate sponsors stay engaged, and that the league can keep pulling casual viewers into the ecosystem. A lost season would attack the exact assumptions those investors are relying on. If games disappear, the casual audience doesn't just pause, it drifts. If the momentum fades, the projected growth story gets weaker. And when the growth story gets weaker, valuations stop looking like proof of value and start looking like a reminder of how quickly hype can inflate numbers. That's the part fans understand instinctively. They see that the league's current stability is still being built, and they assume outside support has limits. If the WNBA becomes a recurring labor battlefield, people will start asking why the backstop should keep getting bigger. Not because they hate the players, but because the business logic stops making sense to them once the product is repeatedly threatened. The NBA's backing of the WNBA has never been framed as a quick flip. It's been a long-term bet built on growing women's basketball, expanding the audience, and doing something that aligns with broader cultural and business priorities. That support has carried the league through years where the numbers didn't fully stand on their own. But that patience has limits, especially if the product gets taken off the market by choice. If players shut down a season after rejecting an offer that includes a path to revenue sharing and major salary growth, the consequences won't show up as some dramatic press release the next day. It'll show up later, quietly, in the next negotiation cycle, in the next request for investment, in the next round of expansion conversations where the appetite suddenly cools. The core issue is that players are treating one breakout moment as if it automatically converts into permanent leverage. Momentum helps, but leverage requires proof that the momentum is durable. It requires showing that growth doesn't collapse the moment the league hits turbulence. It requires evidence that the league can hold audience attention even when the biggest draw isn't on the floor. And that's the vulnerability right now. The surge is real, but it's uneven. A lot of the spike is concentrated around a small cluster of stars with Caitlin Clark at the center of it. When the attention is that concentrated, it changes how owners and networks evaluate risk. They start thinking in tiers. Who moves the needle? Who fills seats? Who sells subscriptions? Who drives the conversation? That's why the phrase, "you need us," lands differently depending on who says it. The league absolutely needs its headline names. It needs the players who can anchor broadcasts, sell arenas, and create must-see moments. But it does not rely equally on every roster spot. That's not a knock on anyone's work ethic. It's how sports economics functions when the audience is star-driven and the margin for error is thin. This is also why the idea of solidarity gets stress-tested in a way people don't like to admit. Solidarity can be powerful, but it's hardest to sustain when the costs aren't evenly survivable and the leverage isn't evenly distributed. The stars can push a standoff longer. The middle of the roster feels the pressure first. The fringe players feel it immediately, and ownership knows that. So if the union is trying to operate as if every player has the same market weight, the negotiation can drift into a fantasy.
Why do you think that the NBA leaked the latest proposals, information, and metrics? Because they understand a large part of the fan base is actually on the owner's side in this. Because we're seeing how large the raises are now. And all these other perks, including, I can understand giving a player like if you're on a 10-day contract, I can understand a team putting you up in a hotel or whatever. I get that. But if you're drawing a regular salary, why in the world would anybody pay for your housing? That's something that fans can't relate to. Especially if you're making an average contract that is, $500,000 a year and eventually might become $1 million a year for an average contract. Yeah, you're losing ground with fans now. And we've said, well, if they go on strike, it's going to be very interesting to watch the chaos of a certain section of players all of a sudden being like, we want to play. Well, then what happens?
In a league where the product is still scaling, replacing depth minutes might not destroy the entire on-court experience in the way it would in a fully mature, ultra-talent-dense ecosystem. That's the uncomfortable reality sitting underneath the talking points. And it's why this strategy carries more risk for the players who can least afford the fallout. In the WNBA, the talent gap is already noticeable from the top of a rotation to the back end of the bench. And the jump from the WNBA to the next pool of talent, top college players, international free agents, fringe pros, is not as dramatic as it would be in a league with a deeper, fully matured talent ecosystem. That matters because it changes what a work stoppage actually means from a leverage standpoint. If a strike hits in May and players refuse to play, the league still has options. None of them are clean, none of them are ideal, but they exist. Ownership can try to keep the most marketable stars on the floor with separate arrangements. They can patch together rosters for low-profile games that aren't driving national television money. They can choose the nuclear route, shut the season down, and come back the following year with a hard reset and a new strategy. The point isn't that those are good outcomes. The point is that they're alternatives, and in negotiations, alternatives are power. The players are betting on 3 assumptions at once. First, that ownership needs them more than they need ownership. Second, that fans will default to blaming the league for being cheap, rather than blaming players for pushing too far. Third, that the momentum from 2024 is strong enough to survive a canceled season and pick up right where it left off. That's a risky bet, because all 3 assumptions depend on public perception staying favorable through chaos. In most sports, labor disputes don't build sympathy over time. They drain it. They turn casual viewers into people who shrug and move on. They turn new fans into former fans before the loyalty ever forms. So the real question isn't whether striking is morally justified. The real question is whether the players understand what they're actually wagering. They're not just wagering a few weeks of checks. They're wagering the league's fragile growth window, their own negotiating position, and the patience of the audience that just started paying attention. And there's another hard truth that doesn't get said on camera. If this escalates into a stoppage and the league takes a hit, the next deal isn't guaranteed to be better. It can be worse. Owners get more conservative after being burned. Networks get more cautious. Sponsors start adding more protections and fewer commitments. That's why this feels like a fork in the road. If the players walk away from a deal that the public already perceives as a major step forward, they might not get rewarded for it. They might get reset. And the casual fans who discovered the WNBA last year won't sit around waiting. They'll find another sport that's actually on. This is the part nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone in that room understands it. Once you take games off the calendar, you can't guarantee you'll get the audience back. You can't rewind the momentum. You can't recreate the feeling that the WNBA was finally becoming must-watch for people who used to scroll past it. Momentum in sports is like trust. It takes years to build and one ugly moment to break. And if a work stoppage happens, the league won't just lose money, players will lose something harder to replace, credibility with the exact casual fans they just earned. The diehards will stay because they always have. But the new viewers, the people who tuned in because they were curious, because the highlights were everywhere, because the storylines felt fresh, they won't wait around while adults argue over percentages. They'll go back to the NBA, back to college hoops, back to anything that's actually being played. That's why this is bigger than who wins the negotiation. The league and the union are both staring at the same truth. If this turns into a full season lost, nobody comes out stronger. The next deal won't magically get sweeter. Investors get colder, sponsors get cautious, networks get hesitant. And the message the public hears won't be about empowerment. It'll be about a league that finally had the spotlight and chose chaos instead. So here's the real question. Are they negotiating for a future they can sustain, or are they about to burn the bridge they just finished building? Because once you make fans feel like the product is optional, they learn how easy it is to live without it. We've got every angle covered, every behind-the-scenes move, every pressure point they won't say on camera. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me who you think blinks first, the owners or the union. Share this video and stay locked in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines. We've got every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Stay locked in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.